We are rolling.
Cool. So next up is we're going to talk about the UR20. This is an optional part of the course, but we know that you guys all have UR20, so we're going to discuss some of the service sides of this new hardware, right? Because we've learned, hopefully have heard by now that the UR20 is a bit different than the previous E-Series. So getting into product specs, first and foremost, it is the UR20. It takes 20 kilograms. Its reach is 1,750 millimeters. These are all specs you can find online. These aren't hidden anywhere, right? Power consumption, 750 watts. In the safety settings, they're identical to previous generations. So E-Series, all 17 of those safety features. It runs the same version of Polyscope with a few asterisks to that, but for the most part, it's going to be about the same, including these same certifications, ISO 13849 standard, which applies to parts of machinery control systems that are assigned to providing safety functions called safety-related parts of a control system. We are also PLD Category 3 certified, which is a redundant system with monitored inputs and outputs for dual channel safety. Okay. And then ISO 10218, which specifies requirements and guidelines for the inherent safe design, protective measures, and information for use of industrial robots, including cobots. It describes basic hazards associated with robots and provides requirements to eliminate or adequately reduce the risks associated with these hazards. We still abide by those standards, right? New robots, same safety standards. And then for the serial number at the bottom, for deciphering the UR20, the first 4 digits are still the production year, followed by the number 6, which is the generation, 6th generation robot from UR. 8, the number 8 designates the UR20 model number. And lastly, the last 5 digits are the production number for that year. Okay, continue on with some more product specs. The force torque sensor has less accuracy than the E-Series UR10 and 16, just being a larger robot that handles more mass. We have an accuracy within 10 newtons and a torque within 1 newton meter. We do have a higher IP rating for the UR20. Previous models were IP54 rated, where the UR20 is IP65 rated, meaning it is fully protected against dust and airborne particles, whilst also being protected against water jets, which also allows the machine to be washed down. That's not accurate, by the way. The jets, yeah. The tool I/O connector, in comparison to the E-Series, is now female. So up until this point, all URs have been male pins. If you look, once we get over to the 20, you'll notice that's finally female M8 socket. The I/O pinout is identical, just now the socket's female. With that, every UR20 does ship with a male-to-male adapter. In other words, if you have existing equipment that works on E-Series that is female, you can still plug in that equipment into the UR20 and it is expected to still work, right? So we provide that for you. In a similar vein, we also supply in the box an adapter for the new tool flange, which is a larger standard than the UR10 and 16 and 3 and 5. However, we do supply an adapter to convert back down to the UR10's hole pattern in the tool flange. Okay, product highlights. We are shipping the UR20 with the CB or Control Box 5.5. That doesn't mean a whole lot to you other than essentially the RAM and the memory is doubled from the E-Series, okay? As well as the error codes that you would find within Polyscope are again identical to previous generations. It's still running the same Polyscope. This is more of a hardware change, okay? So error codes are expected to be identical. They may change as Polyscope progresses, but for now you should expect error codes to be identical. Hopefully easier to understand with some of the new updates coming out. The teach pendant with the UR20 ships standard with the 3PE, or the 3 position enabling teach pendant. If you've never used a 3PE before, I have one here. The way these work is you have 3 positions, right? 1, 2, and 3. The second or middle position is what enables the robot to operate. So in other words, if I want this robot to move, once I get it powered on, way in the corner over there, you can see the light ring, which we'll get to, but you can see it changing colors, right? Where yellow is not moving at all, right? Blue, in this case, is enabled for movement in manual. So as soon as I get to the middle position, I trigger the blue light. If I squeeze all the way, it goes back to yellow. That's the third position, okay? A lot of that's for crushing hazards and electrocution hazards. It's a part of a 3PE. So if I hold that down and press, any of the buttons, I can move the robot in the other way. Free drive. There is no free drive button. There is no free drive button on the 3PE. Instead, this little cap here is actually the USB, the USB port. So there's no free drive button. So how do you still use free drive? We still do have it. The way to use free drive on a UR20 is to double click the 3PE. So if I do that quickly, the light ring at the bottom flashes blue, and that indicates free drive. And I'll cover that here in a little bit, but in the same way you could with the E-Series, you can still free drive the robot. As soon as I let go, robot's rigid again. Okay. The light ring, there are slides coming up, so I'll kind of skip over that one for now. And then lastly, the joint caps on the UR20 are purely cosmetic. In previous generations, you could pull that lid off and access the componentry of the joint. If you pull the if you pull the lids off of this robot, you're going to find more joint casting, okay? Part of the reason we probably got the higher IP rating. Okay, well good. I already covered the 3PE, but just to recap, it is a safety function that does ship standard with the UR20. It only allows robot movement when it is continuously activated, and when it's turned off or deactivated, it can issue a safeguard stop if you're trying to run automatic. In this case, in manual, it would just halt movement of the robot. Okay? Any questions on 3PE? Straightforward? Great. I did mention, or I did not mention yet, every UR, including the UR20, will now ship with a ferrite key inside of the control box. Ferrite key, or ferrite rather, is a piece of component, I should just say, that wraps around the teach pendant cable that prevents crosstalk and electrical interference with the teach pendant. And we now attach a key where you can remove that, the purpose being you can pull out the entire teach pendant out of the control box if the case should arise. If your robot does not have a ferrite key, we do have 3D print STL models we can give you. I'm sure you can find your own ferrite key out there as well, but we do have that. As well as the mounting pattern, which you may have seen in the E-Series, the mounting pattern for the teach pendant, where there is a bracket that helps with strain relief of the teach pendant cable. There are 2 zip ties there. If for whatever reason the teach pendant gets disengaged, when you reinstall it, make sure to put on 2 new zip ties so that strain stays away from the port on the control board. Okay, I was talking about the light ring earlier. You can actually change the color of the base light ring at any time using a couple of different script commands. So the first one being set base light off. If you don't want that thing running at all inside of your program, so this has to run in runtime, right? But you could run the set base light off script command and that base light will remain off. Next is set base light IEC, which I'll skip over just for now, and I'll explain that here in a little bit. And then set base light solid RGB, hopefully is self-explanatory enough, where if you use RGB values in that script line, you can force any color to that light ring in production. Okay. Should be noted, if you use the set base light off or the set base light solid RGB script lines, the standard IEC, which I'll cover, IEC color scheme, if you will, is disabled. In other words, usually red indicates some sort of e-stop, green usually means production, yellow is some warning or it's down, and things like that. In the next slide, I'll define those. Can you show that? Yeah, I can show that. I'll show it in the next slide. To show that, excuse me, let me take a step back. On the IEC, the set base light IEC, that is a standard that UR adheres to for those light colors, right? So if you want those light colors back, you have a couple of options. You can either use this script line. As soon as you use that script line, these standard automatic colors come back to the light ring, or if you power cycle the robot, the next time the robot turns on, it will by default have those standard colors there. So on the robot, we have red, which usually indicates some sort of e-stop. Okay. If I remove that, it goes back to yellow, which is good. Yellow meaning it's not moving or we're just in manual. Let's see, let's turn some motors back on. Green will be automatic. I'll get to that in a second. Blue indicates the 3PE is pressed down, ready to move, right? Ready to move. And if it's flashing, again, that's that free drive portion. Again, this is all part of that IEC light standard. This will all go away if you use those other script lines. And then off is just, there's no power to the arm, right? So green, to get to show green, make a very, very quick program to show green. There we go. Now we have green in production. As soon as I stop that, I'm in green still because the robot is in automatic on the teach pendant. I'll explain that later. But as soon as I put the robot back into manual on the 3PE, green goes away back to yellow. Those are those standard colors. And don't worry, you don't have to take notes on these script lines to control the light ring. It is in the script manual if you would like to change the colors yourself. Okay, moving on to size and safety. The UR20 compared to the 10 is 2 times the TCP linear speed. It's a faster robot. 1.6 times the payload capacity. It can carry more mass. Okay, 1.35 times the reach. Great. 1.8 times the horizontal working area and 2.4 times the working volume and 2 times the weight of our previous largest arm, I suppose, 16 maybe. The reason I bring this up is this is a bigger robot. Now, although all of these safety standards from the previous generations do still apply to the UR20, we are simply carrying around more mass. More mass, more acceleration, more time to decelerate, okay? Those are all factors you need to consider inside of your risk assessment, right? How fast can I move this robot with how much weight and still be considered safe, okay? So that's part of the reason I'm comparing to previous generations. Yes, they're inherently safe, but we are just talking more energy, more potential energy, things like that. Okay. Getting on to mounting, this is quite important. So your UR20 will show up in a box, a little different than the previous generations, but that's okay. The first thing we should note is we should be moving this thing with the pallet jack, high-low, things like that. Is a heavy piece of equipment. Once we unbox and we get the lid off, we can get the foam out of there and you'll be met with a folded up robot with a new thing you may have not seen with UR, which is a strap to pull the robot out of the box, okay? That strap, you have a strap in there, and it is put in a strategic spot so that when you pull it out by a single point, it will balance up in the air. So you're going to be needing to be using some sort of lifting device, not yourself or you and a buddy to pull this thing out of the box. It is heavy. I'd hate for you to drop your brand new expensive robot. Okay, this strap does follow some standards. We can get into that if you really are interested. Other than that, just know that the strap was spec'd out appropriately to pull this thing out of the box. Moving on. Once lifted with some sort of lifting device, crane, engine hoist, high-low, something like that, for a standard base joint or base mounting, lift the thing up, balance the robot with your hands to move it to the base where you're going to be mounting it, and bolt the thing down. If it is an angular at a 45, let's see, some sort of strange 45-degree angle, using the hoist and yourself as leverage to push the elbow down to expose the base to that strange angled position. That's how you would accomplish that. Sideways or upside down. Yeah. I think we understand that. These graphics are all the same. Okay. Anyways, moving on. Here's some actual pictures of how to bolt the robot onto some sort of frame, right? So you can see that strap inside of the box in that somewhat strange configuration, but I promise I have slung one of these. It does balance quite nicely, actually, under a single point. Pull it out of the box and mount onto your frame. Okay. Let's talk about returning this robot. Okay, this is a very, very large arm that is not going to be ideal to ship, or maybe you can't get this thing back into the box to ship it back to UR. So in a different procedure than in the past, we are allowing to ship the robot back in pieces on a secured pallet. Okay, there may be occasions when the joints might fail or the robot faults and the robot is in a position that is not safe or convenient or in a convenient shipping position. In those scenarios, UR does allow the customer to disconnect the elbow joint from the upper arm and ship the robot in two pieces. Very important, this will not void any warranties. We may have claimed that in the past with previous arms. We do understand this is a larger robot. This will absolutely not void any warranties. In a similar vein to previous generations, please just ship us the robot. We don't want your end of arm tooling. We don't want your dress packs. We don't want anything else on there. If you have strange chemicals on the robot, do your best to wipe them off. And if you can't get them off, you do need to supply some sort of SDS to protect our workers from exposing themselves to unknown chemicals, right? So please just ship us the robot. If you ship us extra stuff, you may not get it back. Who knows? Okay. So to wrap this up, I'm going to briefly discuss how to do a joint change, and then we're going to do a joint change. Okay. So on a UR20, every joint connection is the split clamp connection, where in the past, these smaller joints on, say, UR10, up here in the wrists, are the screw-type connections to get in there. All 6 joints are connected with the split collars, so that is a nice improvement from the previous generations. It is very similar otherwise if you've replaced it. Pretty straightforward. If you haven't, that's okay. It's only a couple of bolts and 1 wire, and then your joint is off. Okay. So the first thing you do is you remove or move out of the way the seal around the joint using a flathead screwdriver, and then you remove the 2 screws that are holding the clamp together. Okay, bearing in mind, Okay, if you're replacing a wrist 3, that's pretty straightforward to pull off. If you're replacing the shoulder joint, there may be more consideration as to where's that mass going once disconnected from the robot, right? Use caution with moving the larger components around. We're going to be swapping a wrist 3 today, but bear that in mind. Those size 5 joints can get quite heavy. Okay, once you remove these screws, the collar comes off, and you can see inside there are different connectors in there now. So in years past, there were multiple power connections between the joints and comm wires. Now it is all bundled up into one cable harness, which is nice. It's a nice improvement between the joints. And that is true between all of the joints, the UR20. Okay, so no more pulling multiple wires apart, no more spade connectors. It's all plastic housing.
Wobbly on the inside? Wobbly inside?
Ah, yes. Do we have that pictured? I don't think we do. So inside of the tubes, you do have, so up in this area, right, if we're pulling off this portion of the arm to replace this joint, inside of here is the female connector inside of the tube, right, which is mounted to a piece of metal that is rather flexible, let's say. And so getting in there can be a bit difficult. So if you are replacing this harness particularly, or this joint, I should say, take caution that if you just push against the mounting bracket that it's on, it may bend away from you. You have to get behind it to support clipping in that connector. Not the biggest thing in the world, but bear that in mind. It will flex around on you. Okay. I think that's it. We'll see, there's some pictures here of the different connections. Each joint has a little bit of a different connection. So we'll see the wrist 3 joint here. Right now, actually. So let's go ahead, and I'll take 2 volunteers, and we're going to pull the wrist 3 joint off of the robot. So just like any other joint swap, the robot should be powered off and removed from power. Okay, so I'll take care of that for you guys now. Robot's off. Power is disconnected, and we'll drain the capacitors just for fun. Okay, so with working with electronic components, let's always remember to ground ourselves with the straps. I think you can reach right here to this area to ground yourself. Should be okay. And what we'll do is we'll remove the seal around wrist 3. And there's a toolkit here as well for if you need a flathead. Looks like you got it. Yeah, go ahead and use that one. Bear in mind, if you've never swapped a joint before, as soon as those screws start to get loose, always support the joint or the downstream joints that are about to come off or disengage from the robot. Also bearing in mind, there are wires between the joints. Don't yank everything off as you're working. I don't know the specs. Yeah, what do you know what it is for wrist 3? What's the up? 7.5 or 5.5? Those are only 2 new torques. Okay, so large joints are 7.5 then, I think. I just know those are the 2 new ones that came with. Okay, I'll mention that then. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, I think it's still connected.
You can see, yep, there's the board on there where that whole connector comes off at once.
There's that.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Awesome.
Then just put it back.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep. For reassembly of the new joint, we'll pretend this is the new joint, obviously. Plug those wires back in. In the same way, E-Series joints were keyed where they can only be reassembled one way. UR20 is no different. There's only one way to put these joints on. They won't fit any other way. With the UR20, there are higher torque specs for the connections, where the smaller connections use 5.5 Newton meters, and the larger connections use 7.5 Newton meters. In this case, the RIS3 would take 5.5 Newton meters.
How are we looking on that? It's getting a little closer. Is it in there?
When tightening, remember to not tighten down one side of the split clamp all the way.
There we go.
Leave a balanced gap between both sides when retightening.
Alright, where's the torque wrench?
Where we have to pretend that's it.
Oh.
Yeah.
Click.
Yeah. There we go.
Click.
There we go. Thanks.
Just gotta put the seal back.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
Perfect.
Not too bad, right?
Easy peasy.
Awesome. All right. Well, that is it for the UR20 then. We'll keep on moving. Actually, no, we're done, right?